Imagine stepping into the roaring Colosseum, the sun blazing down, the scent of sweat and blood thick in the air. Thousands of Romans are on their feet, shouting, jeering, and cheering. Below, in the arena, stands a figure, a gladiator, facing death head-on, fighting not just for survival, but for something much bigger. But how did these gladiators come to be? What path led them from captivity or poverty to the sand of the arena, where life or death could be decided in mere moments? And what happened after the fight was over? Today, we're going to dive deep into the brutal yet fascinating world of gladiators, how they were made, where they came from, and even how politics played out around them. Plus, we'll get to know some of the most legendary gladiators ever, Spartacus, Crixus, Priscus, Verus, and Flamma, whose stories are filled with rebellion, loyalty, brotherhood, and a little bit of fame chasing. Gladiators weren't born, they were made. Most were slaves, prisoners of war plucked from the farthest reaches of the Roman Empire. Captured and dragged to Rome, they were stripped of their freedom, but they still clung to one thing: hope. Then, of course, you had the volunteers. Yes, there were actually men who willingly signed up for the bloodshed. Maybe it was for glory, to escape poverty, or just a little midlife crisis. Whatever the reason, these guys saw the arena as a shot at something more. Sure, signing up for daily death matches might not have been the healthiest career choice, but it definitely beat being invisible in Roman society. Gladiators who made a name for themselves could even accumulate wealth, buy their own slaves, and in some cases, eventually free them. Success in the arena could open doors that seemed impossible for most of Rome's lower classes. So once chosen or dragged, they were sent to the ludus or gladiator school. And no, it wasn't your average gym class. Think of it as a medieval version of boot camp minus the protein shakes. The lanista, or trainer, would push them through punishing drills, turning them into fighters with one goal: survival. Well, and putting on a good show, of course. Gladiators had their own brands too, like the Murmillo, a heavy hitter with a large shield and sword, or the Retiarius, the guy who showed up to a sword fight with a net and trident, basically the arena's version of a fisherman. It sounds a bit comical, but trust me, you didn't want to get caught in one of those nets. The crowd wanted drama, suspense, and blood, and being a gladiator wasn't just about winning. It was about making sure the audience loved you, even if it was your last fight. When the day came to step into the arena, imagine standing there, the walls of the Colosseum towering above, the crowd chanting your name, or booing you off the sand, depending on your reputation. Here, gladiators fought not just for survival, but for fame, glory, and in some cases freedom. Take Spartacus, for example. This guy wasn't just any gladiator, he was the one who sparked one of the largest slave rebellions in Roman history. Imagine being so done with your day job that you rebelled against an entire empire. Spartacus's uprising shook Rome to its core, proving that gladiators weren't just pawns. They could become kings of their own destiny, even if only for a moment. Then there's Crixus, Spartacus's right-hand man. They started off as close allies, but ambition has a funny way of ruining friendships. Eventually, Crixus split from Spartacus, determined to make a name for himself. His story reminds us that even in rebellion, egos can clash. On the flip side, you've got Priscus and Verus. These two fought one of the most famous gladiator battles in history. Picture this. They fought so hard and so evenly that both men were declared winners. Basically, the Roman version of a tie, except with more blood. Their brotherhood and honor were rare in a world where the usual outcome was, well, let's just say not so friendly. And who could forget Flamma? This guy was a fan favorite. A Syrian-born slave, he fought over 30 times in the arena. He was awarded the rudis, a wooden sword that symbolized freedom, on more than one occasion. But guess what? He turned it down. Every single time. Why? Because he loved the fight. Some people just can't resist the spotlight, right? Now, let's talk about something gladiators weren't supposed to have: families. Legally, gladiators under contract were not allowed to marry. But when has Roman law ever been a match for the human heart? Some gladiators formed relationships and had unofficial wives and children, bending the rules with a little help from sympathetic owners or managers. In fact, there's evidence that some unfree gladiators were able to bequeath property and wealth to their families, despite the law. This suggests that success in the arena didn't just bring fame and money. It also allowed for a more complex and, in some ways, privileged life. And while gladiators weren't exactly high society, they certainly weren't without admirers. There are plenty of accounts of women being attracted to gladiators, even the ugliest and most scarred ones. Something about their bravery and strength in the arena made them desirable, despite their low status. Maybe the scars just added to the mystique. For those who managed to gain freedom, whether through manumission or completing their contract, life opened up in a big way. They could marry legally, have families, and enjoy the wealth they'd accumulated. Successful gladiators could even make large sums of money, which made supporting a family after retiring a real possibility. But while they might have become wealthy and popular, their legal and social status was always a bit complicated. Even the richest gladiators were still considered marginal figures while under contract. It wasn't until they left the arena behind that they could truly integrate into Roman society. So what happens when the dust settles and the crowd goes home? For most gladiators, the end was death, either in the arena or from the grueling toll of constant combat. But a few lucky ones earned their freedom. Imagine being handed the rudies, knowing you'd fought your last fight. It sounds sweet, but life wasn't always a bed of roses after leaving the sand. Even free, many gladiators struggled to fit back into Roman society. Sure, they were legends in the arena, but outside of it, they were battle-scarred men with violent pasts. Some ended up training the next generation of fighters, while others just tried to disappear into the background, well, as much as a famous ex-gladiator could. But here's the kicker. Gladiators weren't just fighters, they were political pawns. The games themselves, oh, they were a brilliant distraction. Roman leaders used the spectacle to keep the people entertained and distracted. I mean, what's a little corruption or economic crisis when you've got a front-row seat to a gladiator showdown? Emperors like Augustus and Nero knew that throwing a good gladiatorial game could keep the masses happy and prevent them from rebelling. After all, if you keep them fed and entertained, they won't notice the cracks in the empire. Gladiators were part of the emperor's toolbox for maintaining power. And yet, the stories of Spartacus, Crixus, and even Flamma showed that these fighters weren't always content to just play their part. Sometimes, they rose up, shook things up, and made sure everyone knew that gladiators were more than just pieces on a political chessboard. Gladiators were more than just men swinging swords in the sand. They were symbols of rebellion, loyalty, honor, and glory. Some, like Spartacus, became legends through defiance. Others, like Priscus and Verus, earned their place through their bond. And Flamma? Well, he lived for the crowd's love and the thrill of the fight. Whether they found freedom, fame, or an early death, every gladiator left their mark on history. Their stories remind us that even in the darkest, bloodiest corners of human history, there are always tales of courage, brotherhood, and sometimes a little bit of showmanship.